Hey, I'm Fred Stoller. I'm not sure where you know me from. People always ask, where do I know you from? I don't know, Raymond or Seinfeld. And you're listening to my interview on gogoodman.com.au.
Like most comedy actors, you started out as a stand-up comedian. What is your earliest memory of comedy having an effect on your life?
To me, before I started, right? I was more swayed by pathos, by kind of sad things like The Last Picture Show. And, wow, that's a great question because I don't get that. What was my first effects of comedy? I was more affected by those 70s movies like Joe or The Last Picture Show or Midnight Cowboy. Do you remember those?
Nah, they're a little bit before my time.
Yes, and I was more swayed by kind of the comedy I ended up doing, kind of real and sad and funny. So I just related to kind of sad, funny situations of people not fitting in. And I just related to characters like me going, that guy's a little off, socially awkward. And I just sat up in my seat. And it made me want to just be that character in movies. That kind of, like I said, there was a darkness in the 70s movies in the United States that exuded almost like the 90s of independent films, like that Steve Buscemi kind of 90s, you know what I'm saying? I related to those kind of movies.
Were your parents into comedy?
Into it performing or just enjoying it?
Either. So, yeah, where did your interest in comedy come from? Was it from your parents?
No. The thing is, as I was saying, I was a very, very shy and depressed kid. When I decided to be a stand-up comedian, it made no sense to them, because it wasn't like comedy now, such an influx of it all over. And I just saw it as a path. I wanted to be a character actor, and I didn't know how you did it. And they had these comedy clubs, the Improvisation in New York, and I heard that you did an act, and you got on the Tonight Show, then you got on a sitcom. So I thought it was that easy. I thought, although I was very shy, I just had to get on stage once, I thought. And that didn't happen, but that became my act, where I couldn't look at the audience, and I did these morbid, non-sequitur one-liners. So my parents, they weren't comedy buffs. I don't remember. It's just very odd to all my relatives and all my friends that I ever decided to be a comedian.
And how did you get into stand-up comedy? So how did you get your first gig? Do you remember?
Yeah, well, like I said, I knew about the club, the Improvisation in New York, where so many people started. So I would just wait online to audition and hope to become a regular. A regular is when you get, stage time and hope to be seen by people. And I hung out with people. Actually, Steve Buscemi tried being a comedian, and I hung out with him. I hung out with Gilbert Gottfried. I started with Jerry Seinfeld. And so then, I went on late night, and I did my act. And my act, comedy isn't as sophisticated as it is now, where a kid can watch YouTube and see all these comics and see what it is. I just listened to comedy albums. They were about people coming from bad neighborhoods, and I thought you had to live in a black neighborhood. So my act didn't make much sense. It was pretty juvenile. But then I hung out, and little by little, going on late at night, I just found my voice. Just, found out who I was, this nervous, shy guy with a negative mother and awkward with women, and just started, so that's where I perfected my act, the Improvisation in Manhattan. And then there was the comedy boom of the 80s, where there were lots of clubs springing up in New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, different states. So I was able just to get a lot of stage time. It was just good timing.
So if you think back to your first ever stand-up comedy routine, do you remember the audience reaction?
My very first time?
Yeah.
I think, wow. I went on late at night, and I think the laughs I got, now that I look in hindsight, they were laughing at me because it was just so kind of like sad. This shy guy thinking he had to be a hip guy, and and talk about living in a poor neighborhood when I didn't. So it was one or two people were supportive, but I did really stupid jokes that made no sense. Like I said, I asked this girl out. She told me to gain weight. I said, every time I look at you, I do gain weight. I guess meaning an erection, which makes no sense because it's not gaining weight. So it was pretty corny and bad jokes.
And you said the path to get into acting was through stand-up comedy and then get noticed by the late night show. Who hosted late night back then?
Well, back when I started, they had Johnny Carson, of course, The Tonight Show, and who else? David Letterman had Late Night with David Letterman. Now there are so many on. When I was starting out, there was, I think, only Johnny Carson and The Tonight Show and Late Night with David Letterman, and there was these kind of unwritten rules. If you did Letterman, you didn't do Carson because one wanted to be the one that broke you in. And so once a year, the booker from The Tonight Show would come to New York to look at the acts, and I never got to be on one of those showcases, but you'd hope he'd see you. And some comics eventually moved to L.A. to hope to get on The Tonight Show. So though that seemed to be the break back before all these other shows, there were other opportunities eventually. HBO, cable was just emerging, the Young Comedian specials, and all these other evening at the Improv, the improvisation in Los Angeles and Hollywood. So you couldn't really make it big from some of these cable shows, but they were just opportunities. And the big ones seemed to be back then HBO and The Tonight Show, until eventually it got watered down where there were so many. But so that's the, even though I was never a class clown, never funny, it just was the path, I thought, that I knew, and it seemed accessible. And, I never really toiled in theater or anything, but fairly quickly in the game, my character, the sad sack, talking about my mother and, was taking on. People were noticing it, so I said I'll stick with the stand-up comedy.
So how long ago did guys like Conan come into the industry and start their own late-night show?
Conan, I think in 1994, if I'm not mistaken.
He came much later.
Yeah, yes. Conan replaced David Letterman when David Letterman got a CBS show. So that was much later on, and then it got cloudy. It wasn't like there was that one shot you had, like The Tonight Show. I mean, I did a bunch of cable shows, and people thought I was on The Tonight Show. So, yes, early on, before all these shows, you could kind of really make it like David Brennan did, a stand-up you may not be familiar with from a Tonight Show spot. But now, like I said, there were so many, it's hard to even decipher how someone breaks. Like Kevin Hart, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a movie star and a comedy star. We go, well, how did he get his break? It's not as clear-cut as, what someone's launching pad is, the way it used to be.
Yeah, so you went into stand-up comedy. So how long did it take you to kind of get your foot into acting where you wanted to get originally?
About 2 years. I came to L.A. I came here just when there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, so the whole industry was shut down, so I couldn't really pursue too much. And then I got a deal with NBC, a very little deal, and I got on a situation comedy no one heard of, just won 4 episodes. And then I started appearing in shows like Murphy Brown, as a nebbish. A nebbish is a Jewish word for meek person, guy who messes up. I played delivery guys, clerks. I started doing little parts in shows, Amen, Empty Nest, thinking I was on my path. And then, I don't know if you know, I got a writing job on Seinfeld. And
I've got a question about that a little bit later, so...
Okay, and that didn't work out, but it was an interesting path. But then I acted on a Seinfeld, and it's kind of interesting that I started the comedy boom of the '80s, where there was a lot of comedy clubs that died out. Then I got a lot of work in the sitcom boom of the 90s, and that died out because then reality TV came in, game shows, all those news magazine shows. So they used to have sitcoms on every network, like 4 nights. So there was a lot of work for character actors. So, but around the early 90s, I started breaking into the guest star world.
And yeah, so you call yourself the perennial guest star. Is that kind of what you wanted to get into, or were you looking to get into a show as like one of the main characters? What do you kind of prefer? I mean, can you make a career out of being a guest star? Is I'm trying to ask.
Well, it's debatable to my mother what a career is, but yeah, obviously, if you want to have a nice house and security, it's nicer to be a regular. I didn't say to a show, I don't want to be a regular. I just want to be a guy that pops up here and there. It's just sort of what's been happening. I mean, that's what my book is about. Maybe we'll have you back because you hope they say that. My career is like I'm almost like a foster child going from show to show, hoping one of them keeps me on. And, yeah, who knows? We all want something more. Maybe, I think I would have liked to have been like a Steve Buscemi. Do you know who he is?
Yeah, I've seen him in a few different movies.
Yeah, do something fun and gritty and just, but as I've gotten older, I've come to terms that, well, it's not so bad being the guy that people recognize at the mall and kids smile and that I've made some little impact. And yes, ideally it would be good to be on a show like Breaking Bad, if be one of the main guys in a cool quality show, but maybe that will happen. But no, I didn't plan. I didn't say, gee, I want to just work here and there as a guy, but that's why I wrote the book. I thought it's an interesting tale. I follow sports, and I always like books about, athletes that are trying to get into the major leagues and have to play in Europe or the minor leagues or, and they're just hanging on and have an interesting tale because I've been on so many different shows. It's my friend's son says, Dad, Fred's been on more shows than a famous person. More credit. So it's kind of funny that dates look at my IMDb credits and think I'm rich. But when I was on Raymond, Ray Romano, the star, would say, how do they do things on other shows? So I was always a barometer, because I was, the guy that's been on a lot of shows. So the regulars would ask how their show is compared to other shows. So it's kind of an interesting journey I've been on, like a foster child.
In your opinion, is that the best kind of role for you, or do you think you would be able to, I guess, hold down a regular slot with working 5 days a week, God knows how many hours a day, or do you, in hindsight, prefer being a cameo role for so many different shows and getting a taste of every different kind of show?
Well, it is fun to have a taste, to have this variety. But yes, it would be nice to, if you're a regular, you don't put in that many more hours than what I do. So, like I said, it would be nice to have some variety in the shows I'm on, where I'd love to play a cop or a bad guy, be on a drama, do something else. So, I think, it would be good to obviously be part of something. You see these things, like, do you have the show Breaking Bad in Australia?
Yeah, I personally haven't watched it, but it is big here.
But you see them on talk shows, and they're all a family, and they have so much fun being on the set, and they're glad to be on this great show. I would love that feeling. Like, I'm not complaining, because, it's been a nice journey, but sometimes part of the book is, you're on a show, and they're all, and I'm hearing what the regulars, are going to wear to the Emmys, and they're talking about the new house they bought, and they're all going to go to a play together. So you feel sort of left out. So
yeah, it'd be hard to make. I guess, strong friendships if you're only on each set for a very short time.
Yeah, I always say it's hard flirting with women. Like, they're nice, but it's like war. They go, don't get too friendly to this guy. He may get ticked off. So, yeah, it's right. Yes, you have more of a family sense if you're always on the set and rather than the guy just passing through. So, it's nice to have these adventures, but that's why it would be nice, to be one of these guys. Hey, we're bringing on the cast of so-and-so on a show of The Walking Dead, and you see, well, they get killed a lot. It's zombies, but, I always long to, hang out with a bunch of people, but it's the path I'm on, and it's a unique thing. I have a question for you. How did you know about me down in Australia?
Okay. So one of my favorite sitcoms of all time is Everybody Loves Raymond, and I have the box set of that at home. And recently I've watched the series Drake and Josh because I was into that as a kid. So I got that series and I watched that through and I saw you in it. And then even more recently, I've watched the Drew Carey Show, and I saw you pop up in that.
Oh, wow!
So, and then I looked you up, and you've got a list of about 30 or 40 sitcoms that have been aired during my lifetime that you're in, and it's incredible.
Right, yeah. Drew Carey I wrote about my book how I was there in the first few episodes. I was in the office. I thought they'd keep me on. And it didn't happen. So, yes, and I write about all these adventures in my book. So
I've seen your book
Raymond.
online. Yes, I'm definitely going to buy your book very soon.
Oh, thank you so much.
It'd be a great read.
Yeah. So it's an honor to be on some of these seminal shows, part of TV history, and so I take pride in that.
So, as you mentioned, you have worked on a lot of big shows over the years. What's the process in getting each gig? Do they come to you and ask you to be on the show, or do you have a manager or an agent that's going out looking for positions?
Well, when you're first starting out, people don't know you, and you will have auditions, and it's very arduous and very heartbreaking, and cattle calls. And then little by little, you hope people get to know you. And the thing about me is I'm unique, which is a good thing, but it's hard because I don't fit into puzzles so well. I mean, and so I'm fortunate that sometimes I got to a point where, they want me. Oh, this is Fred, and I'm often called Fred in my parts. So... But sometimes I know when I'm wasting my time. I'm auditioning for something that I'm just a New York Jewish guy, and I'm not going to be believable in whatever the role is. So, so lately the better parts come when they just want me.
So
sometimes I audition a lot, but those things don't usually come my way. The things I get are usually when they just write it with me in mind, which is great.
So how often would that happen? Would you say that writers would actually write and say, we want Fred Stoller? Does that happen a lot? Or?
Well, again, it happened more when there were more sitcoms on in the 90s, but next week I'm working on Charlie Sheen's show, and I'm being called Fred, so it's a part, a small part, but they're a lot of fun, and lately I've been in kid shows, like playing a teacher. So it's happening, it's showbiz, it's never easy, but a little bit, here and there, where I'm lucky that I did some kids' animation shows. Handy Manny is a Disney show for kids. I did that a few seasons. I did this PBS show. So it took the load off the desperation of the on-camera, getting to do some, not freaking out when they're not calling with the other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So you're working on anger management next week. That's got to be kind of cool.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, I never met Charlie Sheen, and so that should be. I'm excited about that. And and I didn't have to audition, and I'm playing a guy named Fred, and he's playing a guy named Charlie.
Yeah, he's always called Charlie. It's weird.
And I'm called Fred a lot. I was called Fred in Seinfeld. I was called Fred in the animation show Penguins of Madagascar. I just seem like a Fred.
Now, I want to ask. So I IMDb'd you, and I saw all your credits. And the first big one that I had heard of and that I was a fan of was Lois and Clark. Now, how did you get into Lois and Clark? What was your role back then? I used to watch that as a kid quite a bit. How did you get into Superman?
Yeah, that was one of those things. I did a part on, it was only an usher part, and they saw me. Someone from Lois and Clark, one of the producers, was in the audience and saw me when I did a part on Murphy Brown, and just said he could be the usher.
Yeah, so that's not a very humorous show. So, do you prefer now, in hindsight, acting in comedies, or do you like more serious shows where the feeling around the set is a bit more serious?
Well, I don't get to do too many serious parts, but to me, I actually like not having a studio audience. I like I don't need the roar of the crowd. I just get more nervous. I like when it's kind of personal, and I would like to try drama, but I don't do too much of it. I did a little horror movie where I got killed for the first time, so that was a lot of fun. I was an annoying guy, so I enjoyed that.
And since the 90s, you've been in almost every sitcom, so I'm just going to go through some of the ones that I know and ask you about your experiences. The first one that I had on my list was the Drew Carey Show, but you've already talked about that. So the next one was Seinfeld, which you were also a writer, which you said didn't quite work out as planned. So can you talk about, I guess, getting on Seinfeld, working with Jerry and the cast, and then getting into writing? Had you done much writing before?
I wrote some sketches, but not much. And Larry David, who created Seinfeld, I bumped into him at a surprise party, and he knew me from the stand-up scene in New York, and asked me to write what's called a spec script, where you show your writing ability. And then I just fell into it, but it was my first on-staff writing job, and I was sort of on my own. Jerry and Larry would always be hard to get a hold of, and you couldn't get a hold of them until you couldn't write a story until they approved of it, and they were always casting, editing on the floor, writing, and I was kind of on my own. I wrote this thing called a Kindle single called My Seinfeld Year. A Kindle single is these books available on Amazon, mini books, and the success of that helped me get my other book, my actual book.
So what about acting on Seinfeld? Was that going to be a regular thing at all?
No, that was, again, one time. That would have been great if that, if that worked out to be more. Again, one of these heartbreaking one-time things. That's what the book's about. Like, wish there could be more.
Now, the next one is Hannah Montana. How did this cameo come about, and what was Miley Cyrus like back then?
She was nice, though there were problems on the set because she wanted more money, and so she just, she was cordial, but we didn't really hang out. I'm much older, and she, I got to say, on Wizards of Waverly Place, Selena Gomez is very, very sweet. So I enjoyed working on that show. So down to earth, so accessible. Great experience.
Now, you've also been on Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Friends, The Nanny, and countless others, but you're most well-known for your stint on one of my favourite shows, Everybody Loves Raymond. Did you have to audition for the role of Gerard as Ray's cousin, or were you well-known enough by then? That was in 1998, so...
What happened was I auditioned for another part on Raymond that I think went to Bob Odenkirk or Brian Posehn, a comic. But then when I was auditioning, they were saying, he sounds just like Raymond. And my friend who wrote on the show said, if there's ever a part of a cousin, they're going to give it to me. So then that came up. There was a flashback of a wedding, and then someone just wrote a big episode about it. So it came from auditioning for another part. And so I didn't have to audition for the cousin, but I auditioned for the other part I didn't get. That happens a lot with me, where I'll audition for something for a movie and don't get it, but then they'll give me another small part because they like me.
And I remember watching the episode where you came and were kind of put under Ray's wing a little bit. You were kind of his assistant. And I remember Ray walking down to the basement when he'd just been told you guys sound exactly alike, and trying to make him believe that he doesn't sound like you, and he's just saying, now. It's exactly, so funny. Exactly. So you were on... Go on.
I think in the audition I said the word now, and they laughed that I say it just like him, so that's probably what happened.
So you were on Raymond 2 or 3 times. Was that
maybe 5 or 6.
Maybe 5 or 6 even. So were you kind of in the Everybody Loves Raymond family?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I got in everybody. I would get gifts that they would give out at the Christmas things. I got a ring when it was over, but still, it was frustrating because, like I said, they're always talking about the Emmys and their new house, and Brad Garrett would make jokes to Raymond how much money he was making, but they were making more than me. So I was part of the family, but like a distant cousin. Not quite in the family, but sort of.
Yeah,
I'm glad I had the experience, but yeah, you're part of it, but you're still, they're all applauding, and I still was never sure if I was going to be there the next week. So it was nice, but it wasn't quite the home.
Yeah, at one stage, Ray Romano was the highest paid actor in television, so he would have been pretty well off.
And Brad Garrett would tease him about that.
And I've always wanted to know if Ray is a cool guy, because it is one of my favourite TV shows of all time. Is Ray a nice guy?
Very much, so much so that when you get my book, he wrote the forward to it.
Oh, that's cool.
So, and he did a lot of generous things, giving some of the money from the show to the writers, and just pretty accessible. And, very good guy, very generous.
And you've also worked on a few animated series, including one of my favourite cartoons at the moment, Bob's Burgers. Do you prefer real-life acting or voiceover work?
Well, it's hard to say. With voiceovers is very easy. You don't have to shape. You don't have to memorize. You come there, you read it. It's not as pressurized. It's good to do a little bit of both. But the animation, like I said, takes the desperation away, that I have to be auditioning and animate. When I did Bob's Burgers, I got to meet Zach Galifianakis. I don't think I ever met him before, so that was a lot of fun.
And over the years, you've worked on, as I said, you've got 108 credits on IMDb. What has been your favourite show to work on, and why?
Well, I have favorite ones for different reasons. Seinfeld, for the obvious reason that, when I was in the Monk's Diner, just to be in such a famous, iconic place, and that show will live longer than any show I ever did, and the exposure. But then I had fun, like I worked on Norm Macdonald had a show, and it was so much fun hanging out. You know who Norm Macdonald is?
No, I'm not familiar with that show.
No, he's like kind of a crazy guy, him and Artie Lang, and we'd sneak off and play tennis, so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed Treat Williams was an actor I love from the movie Hair, and he had a show no one even heard of, but I was just such in awe of working with this guy. So I think Seinfeld was the most exciting one I've ever been on, and where I got to say some real fun stuff.
And what about your least favorite? What's the one that you wouldn't go back to, or you wouldn't, like, if one of the writers or directors called you again to say, can you come on my new show, that you wouldn't really want to go on to?
Well, it doesn't. You just want a show where they're nice, And my first show I did, one no one ever heard of, one of the people was trying to fire me. And so that wasn't fun. A show you never heard of called Singer and Sons. It's in my book.
Yeah, so that wasn't a good experience.
Wasn't fun, not at all, no.
Have you ever, well, yeah, you've mentioned your book. It's called Maybe We'll Have You Back, The Life of a Perennial TV Guest. Are you someone that likes to reminisce?
Yeah, I love telling fun stories about crazy adventures I've had and who was nice on a set, who wasn't, and different adventures. So it's fun just talking about the different people on the shows, yes.
And you'd have a lot of stories from around Hollywood as well.
Mm-hmm.
And any ones you want to share quickly that are a little bit fun?
Well, and I had a disastrous one-night stand with Kathy Griffin. She wanted to punch me in the face after having sex. So that's
Really?
A crazy one.
Really?
Yes, that's in the book, yes. She was crazy and kind of angry. And
Oh, she still is.
She still is, yeah. I don't know if she's still angry at me, but that was a crazy story.
So, what does the future hold for Fred Stoller? Is there a sitcom out there that you'd love to work on, or do you think you'll get back into stand-up in the near future?
A little bit of both. I'm back in stand-up because of the book. I was doing this thing. I didn't know there was a thing called the Jewish Book Festival, and I would do my acts, and it got me back into it. And I'm writing. I want to write my own kind of crazy show about this misfit guy. So I just hope it has a little bit of everything. I love popping up on different shows. I got a bunch coming up, and I want to write another book. I really enjoyed just telling my story. The way I describe it is I'm always trying to fit into other people's puzzles, be the guest walking on eggshells, but what's liberating about a book is telling my quirky little story. And so I'm glad I get to do that, and I want to do that again.
Have you had any people that you've worked with previously coming up to you saying that they don't want you to put certain stuff in your book?
Well, yeah, one guy is suing me, but it's totally frivolous. The guy they based Kenny Kramer on, so he took. I had an adventure with this guy, and he took something that wasn't said in the book just to make a lawsuit. But no one cares. Norm Macdonald didn't care. Kathy Griffin didn't care. I say I don't put anyone down as much as myself. So only one person objected to it, but what I said in the book.
Do you think you'll ever come out to Australia to do some stand-up or to do a book tour or something?
I would love to. I haven't had any offers yet, but I love going to different places. I've gone, like I said, with my book, Detroit, Atlanta, St. Louis, Philadelphia this year, and I'm doing a reading in Santa Barbara, California. So I'm really enjoying talking about the book, incorporating stories of show business and jokes in my act. So if there's an opportunity, because I have your email now, I'll definitely let you know when I'm out, or you let me know if anyone wants to hear any of these crazy stories.
Yeah, that'd be great. And finally...
the only thing is I hear it's a long plane ride, but I'll deal with it.
It's fine. You get TVs on the plane and you can sleep, so it's an okay plane ride. As long as you get put up somewhere nice when you get to the destination. When you get here, as long as you get put up somewhere nice, you can deal with the plane ride.
All right, yeah, that would be a lot of fun.
So, finally, where... Go on.
Now that my cat died, I travel more because I hated leaving him, but I'm traveling more.
And finally, where can people find you social media-wise to keep up to date with what you're doing?
Well, my website, fredstoller.net. You follow me on Twitter, Fred_Stoller, or Facebook, and I keep lots of updates of what I'm doing, where I am, and just little stories.
Cool. Fred Stoller, it's been a pleasure to talk with someone that I'm convinced is who has been a Hollywood legend for quite some time now. Thank you for talking to me today.
Thank you very much, and I'll keep you apprised if there's anything new going on.